So here's a video just to cover how the PowerPoint should be made. And here is the PowerPoint. Now I'm just gonna share that thing. So just gonna probably draw like a outline of the PowerPoint. Right. So here's the PowerPoint, and then just want to select the black dot. So we have proceeded to the what can a mycorrhizas do. So firstly, we've introduced the theoretical drought mechanisms, and then secondly, we need evidence that a mycorrhizal fungi changes the plant has pollen removals. So that has done. And then we have raised a few research questions. So next slide is about new plan and the timeline. So here's the new plan and the timeline. And we want to put that at the middle. So, and then I really want to come up with something that's very similar to that one on the left. So we can have research objective 1. So objective 1, which is basically that same thing that we have in the confirmation report, right? And then we have the research questions. So as you can see here, they have the case study introduction, experiment setup, and also literature review, site visit. So we can sort of like program the thing like that. So I would go ahead. I don't think I can replicate it. So because we all have the same past study. So I would say we would list the objective 1 and objective 2 under, and also the research questions under one single timeline. So probably put the name here, put the time here, like 2021 August to 2022 November, or actually very recently, so to 2023 April. So that's how we got those two. And the first one is about the plant water use and the drought stress. And the second one is the root morphology and the biomass. And then we can just actually come up with, so after it, we can actually just come up with objective 3, right? So that's about the reinoculation. And then its effects on the water use, drought strategy, root morphology, and the biomass. And that's based on a concept that might change the percentage of colonization. And again, we would put that on the 2023 April to actually May, so May to 2024, maybe April or something, right? Or actually to 2022 March, so that'll be done there. And that's the slide. And then so the next slide will again be something like that. So next slide, we have another slide here, and then roughly we'll introduce what is objective 1. So I would like firstly to pop up the research question here. So we'll say objective 1 blah blah blah, 1 blah 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 blah, and then we'll pop up the research question here with a bit of like shading behind. So research question 1.1, right? And then so I think question 1 for our case was the colonization rates. Like, does it achieve in the bifidus? So after that pops up, we will remove it. So after that pops up, the whole thing goes away. So that goes away, and then we try to solve the problem for objective 1. And then so we need to introduce the parameters. So of course, like the parameters like high V's, vesicles, opuscules, and also the mycorrhizal in total. And so after introducing those structures and also putting probably some pictures here to show what is H, what is V, and what is A under the microscope. And then briefly introduce the way that we calculate M. And then we're gonna summarize basically what are the advantageous traits that we want to see. Like which one matters. Like for this case, the V plus A matters, right? Or V or A matters. And high phi because it's ectomycorrhizal, so it doesn't really matter. And then after introducing that, we between the objective 1 and objective 2, we definitely need to introduce this pot study 1. Sorry, I finished that one firstly, and then we'll come back to add another slide here. So, right, so that's objective 1, and then we need the measurements. So measurements is done here, and briefly introduce, obviously here, like how we get to the results, so the measurements, so basically how we subsampled the plants and how we pre-treat them, like basically the SOPs. And then in the end, how did we put them on a microscope, and what is the slide method that we use to confirm the mycorrhizal colonization, because that's like 100 intersections, right? And continuing that, we'll pop up the results as well. So we come up to here and just continuing from that. So we have the results, and briefly just introduce the tables. That's from the table 1 of the manuscript 1, right? And just really briefly introduce what's up and what's down, and then what are the things that we see and what are the outcomes of the two-way ANOVA, and what works, like which species works and which species doesn't work in case of the mycorrhizal inoculation. And then so that's the question 1. So really just going back to that slides, I'm gonna use like a holo slides here actually to show the things of the pot experiment. So I think we should be very so we should definitely refer to the methods intersection of the especially the timeline and how we propose the water deficit treatments, right? So so here's the pot study or pot experiment setup, and I guess we can just say we have for the objective 1, we have only the water deficit. So water deficit cycle monitored, and then we have, so actually I don't think at this point we need to bring up the water deficit, so we just say it's a dry down experiment, and then later we prescribe the treatments, so mycorrhizal and non-mycorrhizal treatments. And we have 6 species, we have 5 replicates, right? And then even better that we draw like a thing. So we have 5 replicates, so that's why we have like 5 blocks of things. So actually just draw the things out. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then within each we have 12 treatments. So 1, 2, so minus, plus, minus, plus, minus, plus, and then there's like 6 species. So draw it there, plan it out, so that will be straightforward. And then for the part experiment setup, we also introduced the timeline. And then, so probably the timeline would be just, we actually bring them to the establishment, and then colonization, because the inoculation, and then after inoculation with keep them well watered, and that's when the ET was monitored for, and ET and crop factors were monitored, and then we exposed them to dry cycles to acclimatize them. And then we have the water deficit dry down phase. And then during that, we have, ET, soil moisture, and that ED sensitivity, and also the water potential and a hydroscape measured. So that forms the whole story. I do think it's useful to just go through that whole objective 2 again. So I think because objective 2 is just basically like a replicates of the objective 1, right? So that connects here, and then basically just change that objective 1 to objective 2. And then you would use the same thing, so just copy and paste the whole thing. So this whole stuff here, just copy and paste that there. Oh, damn it. So by subject and subjects and dividers. Right. Okay. Redo. So, right, I can't remove it now, but so that's a bit messy. So, right, so we copy and paste that here, so that stays the same. But then I think actually for experiment 2, it's not the best way to do it. So I think it's good that we copy and paste that whole thing there, and we have the 6 blocks here, right? So we need to redraw those. So we should use like a red thing here, so to just add onto the treatments, so WD and WW treatments. And for that, we change that to minus and minus and plus. So that will reflect the changes of WD and WW. So that is the plan. That red thing actually reflects the changes. And then we go to timeline. I think it's roughly the same thing. So really just copy that under there, and then try to change the morphology stuff. So I think the establishment is the same. So timeline and establishment is the same, and we go to the inoculation, and we go to the well water phase, and we go to the water draft. So dry cycle, so keep them the same. And then I think we need to take like a harvest, and then also in that sense we should add in the establishment that we have this initial fresh weights and the dry weights and everything, right? So in the harvest, we could say we have the root morphology, and also here also root morphology as well. And we have root morphology, and we have the biomass. So that would be really everything that we have, and then of course, like biomass will have like RGR as well, so that depending on how you want to do it. So that will, the whole thing will feed back to the new plan and the objective one. So I think it really needs to speed up. So for objective one, I think, so you can continue and then just following the same trick. So you introduce the parameters and see the advantageous traits. So now we talk about ET under well watered, right? And so I think, actually we don't need to talk about water deficit right now, but just ET under well water phase. And then it's great that you can talk about the advantageous traits. Like basically the implications of it. So if you have, so you can say if you have a high ET, you will have like pollutant removal benefits, right? And then when you have a low ET, and you can say like, however, you have the problem of being vulnerable to the drought. And then when you have a low ET, so when you have a low ET, you will have more resilience to drought, but then also you have a rate. So it's like a trade-off. But then because we're dealing with drought, we definitely want to emphasize that resilience to drought problem. So we come back and we can talk about a measurement. So you can say, well, the ET was measured during the well water phase for like 30 days. And meanwhile, the ET nod, the reference river transpiration, was measured from the weather station. And ET that and then we calculate the crop factors based on the linear regression of ET and ET nod, and then compare that, and then we've got the measurement. And now after doing that, we can basically show them the results. So just another slide, and then actually you can put some photos here, like that could be exactly like how we measure this ET. So we go to the morning, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and then just like put a photo of the plant sitting on a scale. And then you can also take a photo of the weather station here. And next we show them the data. So you can have the results here, and that carries on objective one. So on the left, you can just post out the average ET, millimeters per day, and then show them there's no statistical difference. And obviously just explain why we have VPD. So that's the vapor pressure normalized one, so that will be more fair to include the variation of it in the weather. And now on the right hand side, we can have those crop factor plot. So basically this plot we have for those, and then just briefly talk about how mycorrhizals would change everything, right? And that's it. So the conclusion would just be like mycorrhizals did not significantly change the ET. But then we can see like a percentage increase in some plants and a percentage decrease in some plants. And you can carry on to talk about objective 2. Objective 1 actually, so objective 1. So now we can have the same setup, like ET under WD. So actually, I just modified that. So you have this ET on the WD, right? And advantageous trades would be that ET. So now you need to incorporate this drought avoidance and drought strategy. So definitely on the drought, we prefer the ET decreases because it's more resilient to drought, and that's a sense of drought avoidance, and that's supported by some reference like August, right? So definitely talk a lot about it, and also introduce the concept of ET sustained, so maintained ET maintains dominant regulation during a drought, and so that you have this drought tolerance, and tell about how drought tolerance would support the survival of the drought. So definitely just bring out different ideas about it, and not making some conclusions. So probably change the wording here, not advantageous, just different traits. And now we can also talk about how ET changes. So how we monitor the ET during WD over 30 days, or like 45 days, 43 days actually. And the weather station was kept going. Actually, we don't have to talk about the station, but then we can say here that we have the soil moisture, right? And we have the water potential monitored as well. You can just add them up, and then what else? So basically that, right? And that leads to firstly your average ET when during that soil moisture dry down, and then you can give out the table later, and also you can talk about the ET sensitivity. So ET critical, actually that's theta ET, right? So briefly introduce like why that matters and how that would help to regulate the plant drought responses, and so on. Right, again, so when you were introducing those two, probably just to include some conceptual pictures here, like how in general the ET will look like during drought, like so moisture and ET. You can say like, oh, it decreases over time, and then there's always like a breaking point, and then also make some references here, like how other people describe the problem, and then tell them why that theta ET is important. And then you can just go ahead and show them the results again. So we have two results here. So firstly, the ET results. So on the left, you have this ET results, which is totally about the average ET over time, over soil moisture. And then under different soil moisture, we reported different significance. So definitely give an emphasis on this species, on the critical soil moisture, which shows like dramatic changes. And also talk about on the right hand side how those soil moisture changes, right, like mycorrhizals and the inoculation wise, and how they change and how they imply back, and how they probably correlate to the drought avoidance strategy. Drought responses. And then we come back, and now we have the water potential stuff. What's the potential? And also you can follow the same thing. So you can say the water potential, so psi MD and psi PD was measured during that water deficit time, and then you can explain with like graphs, like how it was measured, like PD was